You are listening to the What a Word podcast, an interview style podcast where guests bring their unique experiences and insight on culture, life's challenges, and faith. Each episode is seasoned with words which will inspire and encourage. Now, here is your host, Ryan Sharp.
Welcome and thank you for joining me for the What a Word podcast. As you know, this is an interview style podcast where guests share on life challenges, culture, and faith. I'm humbled and honored to share each week with guests who come from a variety of walks of life. As you know, one of the goals here is to give you living, breathing people who have overcome challenges, who inspire others, and are doing impactful work. And this evening is no different. I'm joined by an old friend of mine, Duane Harley. He's an entertainment lawyer. And interestingly enough, I learned that people I knew in my local church were represented by him, whether they were licensing their musical offerings, whether they were putting out books, whether they were putting out content that they wanted protected. They were using Duane, and I was fascinated by the work he did. Very humble. He had when I met him, he was having meetings with very impactful people, and not only, as I said, in the gospel industry, but in the secular industry as well. I'm happy to have him on the podcast. He's a graduate of Quinnipiac Law School, does a lot of work with young people in the community, and really got his feet wet working with a firm in Manhattan that we'll discuss some more, doing all types of agreements and contracts. He has his own firm now where he's expanded his reach, doing copyright, trademark, protecting the content of talented individuals. And to a person, I think we can all agree that just coming up and being fans of good music and artistry and film, we've learned of what happens when people's interests aren't protected. Some of our favorite artists who appear well in interviews and in videos, many of them have stories of just being taken advantage of. So I was happy to meet Duane because I knew so many creatives who needed his help. And he's no doubt doing impactful work. Again, if you are a prospective law student, or if you are thinking about getting in the entertainment industry in some capacity, I believe our conversation will give you something to think about in terms of your place in the entertainment industry. I'm happy to have my guest. Please join me in welcoming Duane Harley to the What a Word podcast. Welcome, man.
Thanks for having me.
Honored, man. Honored, Duane. I wanted to ask you, man, as we get into it, tell us a little about the community in which you were raised, the kind of music you were around, etc.
Well, I was raised in Teaneck, New Jersey. R&B music pretty much was my forte in the very beginning. I also grew up in the church. My mom used to play the organ and the piano for church. So I was obviously in the choir sometimes. So I was familiar with a lot of the gospel music as well. But then in my earlier preteen years, the genre, that's when hip hop started coming out, and I started really getting into the hip hop music. So that was kind of like my initiation into loving what we now call, the rap hip hop music right now.
And I'm glad you said that, man, because for us, these were men and women who looked like us. Many of them were our age. And I think for me, music informed, gave me the vocabulary for what was happening in the industry. Like until I read music publications like The Source, Vibe magazine, Rolling Stone. I knew nothing about recoupables, points, publishing, masters. And I had to learn about it from the misfortunes of many of my favorite artists. Is that what inspired you to get into law and do entertainment law? Was this background why you got into that field?
Yeah, somewhat. It kind of happened somewhat accidentally, because just like everybody else, I'm outside the industry, and you're only seeing the glitz, the glamour, and the fun, right? You're only seeing what you enjoy. I loved hip hop music. I wanted to be part of it, but I didn't rap, I didn't dance, I didn't sing, I didn't do any of those things. But I hung around a lot of folks who had. And I remember one time some friends of mine, they were in the group Das Effects. I went to the video shoot, and I said, see, everybody running around, everyone had things to do, whether it be the artists, whether, the rappers, whether it be the backup, people that were in the background doing the design, people who do the clothes. I mean, there's so many things, jobs people were doing outside of just the rapper. But then there was one gentleman that everybody was going to see, which happened to be the lawyer. And at the time, I guess he was approving certain rights, or looking over some paperwork right there on the set. And that was really the first time I really got aware that a lawyer was part of this process at some level. But at the time, I still did not know exactly what it was, until I was working for this group called the Youth Advocate Program, which we would take children who were in group homes and just try to give them life experience, or give them job training experience if they were of age. And I remember one time a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, actually, he Gerard King, he actually passed away, but he at the time was the manager for Matt Lyon, which was a reggae artist who was signed underneath KRS-One. And he came to speak to the group of kids that I was working with at this program, and he brought his attorney to speak to the kids. And that was the first time I really even heard of an entertainment lawyer. So it was KRS-One's lawyer who came and spoke with the kids, and then he and I chopped it up after it for hours. He let me just pick his brain, and we just kept talking, because I was amazed that there was such a thing called an entertainment attorney. I thought all attorneys went to court. I thought all attorneys was suing people or getting people off of criminal cases or whatever they were doing. I didn't know there was lawyers for entertainment, music, protecting rights. And he explained the whole industry to me and what he did, and I instantly became attracted to that type of work.
Powerful, man, powerful. Your bio talks about you being a research assistant for an attorney. So you could have easily gone the criminal law defense route. What caused the shift in law school where you decided, man, I'm gonna just put it all into the trademark classes, etc. I don't know if that was your history, whether you were just exposed to early classes and decided, how did you decide on entertainment law?
Well, I decided after I spoke to the attorney, I said, this is what I want to do. Because again, I didn't sing, I didn't dance, I didn't rap, but I knew I loved the music and I wanted to be part of it and in it. And then I always felt like I was a person who was organized and thought I had a good sense of myself, that I can actually have strategy and be somebody that can articulate a plan, right? So when I went to law school, in my mind, I said, I'm going to law school to be an entertainment lawyer. But that's such a specialized field. Most law schools, especially at the time when I went in 96, they didn't have classes for entertainment law, right? They didn't have, you want to be an entertainment lawyer? Well, come take this entertainment law class. They didn't have that at the school I went to, right? So it wasn't like if I wanted to be a litigator or some type of PI, lawyer, or corporate attorney that specialized classes and direction for that. You kind of had to make your own way, right? So, but I did know I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. So when I went to school, that was the first thing I asked the placement office. You know, what did they have anything where I can get exposed to entertainment law? And they did not. But you know, God always has a plan when you see there is no plan, right? God always makes his plan. You may not know exactly what it is, but he gets you to where you need to be. Because my professor, as you mentioned, Marilyn Ford, she was my professor for business. And she also was a of counsel at one of the big firms in Connecticut at the time. And it just so happened one of these, the rapper Keith Murray, his song just came out with R. Kelly. I don't know if you remember the record called Home Alone. Mm-hmm. And he already had a hit called The Most Beautiful Thing in the World. He was doing a show in Connecticut, and a fight broke out, and somehow he got wrapped up into this brawl. And then he was sued and arrested and was convicted and was put in jail for 3 years.
Wow.
So he hired this firm in Connecticut, which my professor at the time was his lead attorney. Now, being in her class, and she knew I love rap music because I was the guy coming in looking like I had the hip hop swag, and she knew that, you know, that was part of my DNA. She invited me to work with her on this case as her research assistant. So that's how I started working with her as a research assistant. So I basically was researching a lot of the case law regarding assault, et cetera, et cetera. But you also had to do research on the client, right? And certain rights, because he was also getting sued. So what rights that he owned, which was his music, publishing, et cetera, that we can protect. So I had to do research on those type of rights, which bled into me becoming interested in IP, you know, intellectual property and copyrights. So that led me to see the lane that I need to take to be more engaged in this area. So doing that research on these cases, I just got more and more involved and more interested and deeper in what it takes to protect certain rights of artists from that side. So that's what led me down the road there.
A light bulb just went off, Duane, and here's why, man. You tapped into something that I think informed our experience, whether it's gospel. And, you know, I watched the biopic of the Clark sisters, and one of the sisters, I think Twinkie, was so talented. She wrote some of their most popular songs. And we saw in one of the episodes where she sold her publishing for a Cadillac. I mean, we understand now what publishing means because, you know, so many artists have spoken about, you know, the lack of information they had going into the business. Then there's New Edition. We all grew up on them.
That's right.
These young men were performing all over the world, selling millions of albums. And we are learning later on, because of the deals they signed, without any attorney input, they lost so much in terms of income. Now, was it disheartening to you to learn that the music business was more business than music? I mean,
well, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I was surprised that so many artists, after you described, still kind of felt in the hole.
Sure.
You think if you know better, you do better, right? You would assume, but it's kind of hard at the same time to criticize these artists who have these dreams.
Sure.
And it's their time to actually pursue it, and this could be their only chance. So they may just sign almost anything you put in front of them to get that opportunity. They just gambling on themselves altogether. You know, we do like to look at the horror stories if it doesn't work out, but a lot of these gambles, you know, sometimes they do work out, and we just don't really know about it because it worked out. You know, but in the beginning, a lot of people may have to take more risks and give up a lot more than, you know, than they should. But you got to have the work ethic, right? If you're going to take the gamble, if you're going to be in this game, and I tell a lot of young artists out there as well, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, it may be fun to sing, but it's a job too, because the reality is you can't, you know, if you are successful, there's even more pressure. Because if you come out with a hit record, you have to do it again and do it again. And the pressure to do it again could be overwhelming. So there's no way you could say it's easy, because you have to continuously do it over and over again. So it's hard either way, but if in fact the artists can somehow believe in themselves a lot more, where they don't have to sign the first thing that comes across the table, they may have better success. Right?
Talent doesn't equal good legal advice or income naturally. And I threw out some terms I'm going to ask you to break down for our audience. I mentioned bad publishing deals, recoupables, points, royalties. What is that about? Because as I told you, I learned that vocabulary reading about some of my favorite artists, young men who were my age, who had talent. And like you said, signed deals, some of them major deals. And you hear the interviews now, they have nothing to show for all of that talent. What am I talking about when I'm talking about these points, publishing, recoupables, etc.?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about publishing, because publishing really is the holy grail, right? I would say of your long-term financial stability. Now, publishing is, I would like to equate publishing into like ingredients of like a well-cooked meal, right? Whereas if you have a dish that you're selling to the public, and you got all the good stuff cooked in it, and you selling this dish, the dish itself is the master, is the record, right? Is that's what you give into the consumer. But the ingredients that you keep to yourself is the publishing, right? So every time you distribute one of those dishes to one of these consumers, you're also giving the ingredients that's cooked in, which is the publishing. So not only you get paid for the actual dish that you're giving, you're also getting paid for the publishing as an income stream as well. So music, there's multiple income streams every time a record is sold. So you have the actual recording being sold, which is the record price, right? Then you have the publishing that's being distributed when the record is sold, or displayed when it's sold, which you'll have it was right now it's 9.1 cents every time a publishing is transferred over every time. Okay, then you have a performance royalty. So when your record is played on the radio or on TV, you get another performance royalty, and that's proportioned in the same amount of how much of the publishing you own. So if I wrote a record and you produced it without any samples, then I own 50% of the song and you own 50% of the song, right? Now, if I wrote the song and you co-produced it with somebody else, right? Now I own 50% of the song, you own 25%, and the other producer owns 25%. So when I say ownership, that's the publishing split. Okay, so you have to look at it as I like to sometimes look at it as a pizza, as a whole, but also maybe 200, because you have a writer's share and a publishing share. So the writer's share will always go to the writer of the record. The publishing will be split up amongst the people who created it. And the publishing is what is being distributed. And it's very important because publishing always generate income. That's why they call it the long tail. So 20 years after the song has already been out, you can still make money. You know, one of the stories I like to tell, I'll never forget seeing a interview with Rick James. And the interviewer had asked Rick James, and for those who don't know who Rick James was, he was a very successful funk singer in the 70s and 80s that made a whole lot of money, especially when MC Hammer sampled his record "Can't Touch This." It just brought back even more money. That's an example of owning publishing. But he hadn't been on tour for years, and he's been, a lot of issues with drugs and things like that. But he hasn't been a record artist making records in a long time. And the interviewer had asked him, well, how do you keep making, having these lavish parties, living in this big home, and you haven't performed in years? And he just simply said he gets a publishing check every quarter. And that just sums it up. Publishing is the holy grail of your long-term financial stability. And if you're going to give it up, it has to be for a valid purpose or good reason. Be strategic when you're dealing away your publishing. I'm not going to say it's never a good idea to sell it because it's a case-by-case situation, but be strategic.
So my example of gospel artist Twinkie Clark, presumably selling her publishing for a Cadillac, she was not getting the benefit of that bargain at all.
No.
Not at all.
No. Because the publishing increases in value, especially if they use it. Because you got to remember, when you make a record, they may put it in a commercial. A movie may come and want to put it in a movie. In commercials, they give limited runs. So every time the run is over, they want to re-up. That's another check they can give you, and we're talking big money, for that situation. And again, in movies, same thing with movies. They put it in a movie, they have to get what they call a synchronization license to put in time, sync up your music in the film. And that brings in a lot of income. And now we're living in this new media world, right? That's a whole other level of licenses that have to be negotiated and put out. So it's just nonstop, and then we're moving into the metaverse. That's going to be another IP that they're going to have to get permission to use. So it just goes on and on and on.
So I want to talk to you about some of the work you've done thus far. I mentioned to the audience that you did some work for a friend of mine who was putting out a gospel children's album, and you helped him with the licensing, I think, for that. Just talk to us about what, in terms of the business itself, why did he have a need for that? Many people who are talented just make albums and put it out. Yeah. Why did he need an attorney in that instance to get
simple, just to protect the rights, the creative rights, because as soon as you create a work under copyright law, it automatically becomes a copyright. And if you don't have a writing, anybody that's involved with that process become an equal owner. Now, that may be unfair if somebody was sitting in the room and just did one thing, and next thing you know, they own 50% of your music. You want to protect that. So therefore, copyright always have to be in writing with respect to if it's not going to be 50-50 split. So if someone's going to get 10% or 5% of a work that was created, it has to be in writing. Otherwise, they're going to get an equal share. So he did the smart thing. He hired an attorney to make sure that the rights were clear, because when you put out a record, you have to register these songs with maybe a performance rights society, which is be an ASCAP or BMI. And then when the song is being played publicly, they have to pay out a royalty, and they need to know who to pay, where to pay it, and how much to pay. And they only can really do that if there's a writing that specifies that. Otherwise, if they can't pay the money out, this money goes in what they call a black box and sits there uncollected. And then if no one collects it after a certain amount of time, it just gets split up amongst the big companies.
Wow. Deep, man, deep. So you had the desire to practice entertainment law and got hired by the firm Woods Middleton. Talk to us about that experience. What were you exposed to in terms of enhancing your entertainment law skill set?
Yeah, that was a great experience because it was a boutique law firm, and that enabled me to learn the nuts and bolts of contracts, right? So not only was I involved in drafting the agreements, each type of agreement, you also got to work with the client. You also, before the agreement even came across, you discussed your deal terms, your deal points, and what the artist or your client would want out of this deal, or what their expectations are. So you got a feel of what you're going to negotiate. You also was able to hear the project and the content before you actually started negotiating. So you really got familiar with what it is you're talking about. Not all the time, you're not always going to have that ability, though. Sometimes you still have to negotiate, but you kind of should know the parameters and what the client expects. And then you also kind of need to know what the leverage you have and what generally is available across the industry. But I was able to, get very familiar with all types of contracts from the bottom up. So I got to see how a contract was developed from drafting to execution. And it's a multi-level process in that. What I mean to say is, when you draft up a contract, it has to get reviewed. You got to make sure all the terminology is there. You got to make sure that every right that you're trying to secure for your client is there. And then, when you're negotiating it, the other side is going to try to eat into some of those rights, and you still got to protect it. And you got to figure out creative ways to bring everybody in the same accord to get the deal done. So not only you have to be a good drafter, you have to be a good negotiator. So you got to have good oratory skills. You got to know the business too. You got to understand what exactly is important, which battles that you're going to die on, and which battles you may have to let go, which you can come back from. So there's a lot of those things I learned in that firm there, which enabled me to be, I believe, a shrewd negotiator, and very clear exactly how to fight for my clients.
And that's what I want to touch on, man, because I do criminal defense work, and sometimes you have clients who are easy to work with, and other times, and yours is a sophisticated practice. The language, there's a lot there that, you may be looking at and reading and have one interpretation, but the attorney who is well-versed has a more objective understanding of it. Did working at that firm help you to deal with some of the more difficult clients who probably weren't as patient with the negotiating process?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. You get that a lot. And again, remember, we were in the rap game. So there were a lot of clients who didn't really have a lot of patience. They saw one thing, they wanted a check, right? The process itself got in the way of the check. So yeah, but you gotta manage expectations, right?
Yeah.
You can't always be saying they go, give the client whatever they want, because that's just not realistic, right? Mm-hmm. And you gotta also, they have to believe in you as your counselor. You have to gain a relationship where they believe, where you can say that you're working on their best interest, and this is the process. And they're gonna have to, work within the process to get the best outcome. And they have to understand that. But I think once they understand that, then you have a better relationship and a better outcome. working, moving forward when other deals come up. They kind of understand the process. Then it becomes easier.
Good points, man. You know, and I focused a lot on the music side, but I want you, Duane, to touch on the range of clients you represent. But before doing that, I want to ask you as well, do the gospel artists give some of the same challenges as your secular artists in terms of some of the difficulties in terms of working?
The gospel clients I've had, no. And I think because the genre is a lot smaller.
Gotcha.
Unfortunately, though, a lot of the gospel artists, if you're small, you don't necessarily have the leverage. And some of these labels that's in the gospel realm, they might as well be in the secular realm, because you see a lot of, I don't want to really say that, I don't even want to say that they're overreaching where they're just taking advantage, but I you know where the leverage lies. It's still a business, right?
Sure.
At the end of the day, so you may go in there thinking, oh, these are church folks, that, and it's going to be a lot easy, but no, it's still a business, and everyone is fighting for their interests as well.
Sure. And I'm sure in the gospel industry, there's a need to have an attorney protect your creative work too. That the secular industry, it's not limited to the secular industry.
No, not at all. And I mean, more so, I find in the gospel industry, because at least my clients, they make more records more frequently, right? So it's so much material that's out there, and they kind of, before the internet, the gospel clients were actually getting their music out there sooner and faster, and in front of more people, right? So they have more of a need to protect their work, because I just think the way it's being ushered out is a lot different.
For sure. So you have your own firm now. Talk to listeners and viewers about the diverse clientele you represent, because I know we kind of honed in on the music and the artists who perform, etc. But give us the wide range, especially for that law student who is like, you know what, I'm thinking about this now seriously, trying to get in and find a place. Give us the range of artists who you represent.
Yeah. Well, I most of them are in the music, in terms of creators, but majority of them are producers and songwriters. I do represent some independent record labels, executives. I do have some television clients, which actually, I guess I'll do a plug here. The name of the company is called Polaris. We just did a deal with Vizio TV, and it's 100% on Black television network that's on Vizio TV. So if you have a Vizio television, you should be able to click on the Polaris icon and stream content. And we're just building that up. So I represent some television, some producers and movies and television. So I have independent producers. We just did one of my clients, we produced the BET Basement for the Rap Awards. We did the Basement. We brought the Basement back, I think, last year. And we did that. That was exciting. Another client of mine did a documentary on the death of Jam Master Jay. That was on Showtime.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Another client of mine just did a documentary on, it was an election in Philadelphia. It was a local one. This assemblyman, council member ran for the election, but he implemented a certain law with dealing with the police. And it happened down in Philadelphia. But the interesting thing about this was that MSNBC picked it up in this film festival. So I know they have a series, and one of my clients' work was picked up in that. So I think that was very interesting. So not only have music, I have these other content creators also that's outside of music. That's in television, movies, people that run companies that deal with content.
Any challenges with what seems, in my view anyway, to be an unregulated internet where people now can just put out content readily with a wide reach, so to speak? Any challenges you see as one who protects the rights of creatives?
It's wild, wild west, man. Wild, wild west. See, the thing is about the internet is the service providers, they have a what they call a safe haven, right? So the Digital Millennium Act allows these DSPs to have time to take down any legal content without any liability. So that makes it very hard to really go after the wrongdoers, you know, because you're giving the big players who are benefiting from the wrongdoing an out clause, right? They can just take it down and there's no penalty, because under copyright law, for each infringement, if you're registered your copyright, you can get up to $10,000 per infringement, right? Statutory. But that provision kind of negates that. So that kind of takes the teeth out of any real enforcement, you know? So that's one issue I see. Another issue is we don't really know how each DSP is paying clients or artists for their music, because they all have different rates. So there's no standard rate, and they don't let those numbers out. So we don't really know what deal could be really good to negotiate and say, hey, you know.
Unpack what DSP is for those of us who aren't familiar.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's digital service provider.
Gotcha,
So I guess you're talking about, you know, Apple, you know, Spotify, those.
Sure, these streaming. Okay,
yeah, streaming.
Gotcha.
So they all have different ways they pay their you know, money. And generally, artists, you know, they pay a proportionate rate of plays. So let's say Beyonce's record gets 80% of the streams. So she's going to get 80% of the money that comes in off that streaming network, right? So that's how they break it up. But we still don't know how much per stream per se, you know?
Wow.
So that's tough.
Yeah.
And you know, it's tons of money coming in streaming anyway, because you're dealing with advertising money and stuff like that. So it's a lot there.
Wow.
And it's not going away anywhere anytime soon.
Man. So, you know, you and I have touched on and focused a bit on some of the downsides to the industry. What have you seen, though, in terms of when a creative does the right thing, meets with a professional, and follows professional advice? What are the benefits to doing that?
Success. You know, I mean, not only, at the end of the day, it's not a lawyer by themselves going to be the key to success. You know, you have to have hard work. You have to have your self diligence. You also got to be that artist that's going to create great content or music or whatever it is. But given that, you need to have the right team in place. So not just your lawyer, you need to have your business manager. You need to have people that's going to help you build relationships within the industry. Because once you build relationships within the industry, then it's all about picking up a phone call and they like working with you, they work with you again. But if you have the right team in place, and then you could pretty much anything you may want to do, you're able to do, because you'll have your success. You'll have opportunities in different areas of the game. You know, music can only be maybe one step. But once you get into the business, you may be doing other things that's beyond the music, right? You may do television, you may do clothing. I don't know if you saw that Pharrell right now is like the head guy for the designer for Louis Vuitton right now. But he's a producer, musician, music, but now he's doing his things with Louis Vuitton, which is huge, right? So the sky is not the limit. It's going to be the beginning if you have your business in order and also committed to doing the hard work.
Right. And most of us, man, wish it were just talent because, like I said in the beginning, we're learning now just from the experiences of some of our favorites that it's more business than, you know, the performance side. A lot of business agreements tend to, um, and done right, like you said, leads to a successful career, etc. You know, I was watching, you know, here's another tragic example. I was watching the And One, a documentary on the And One movement,
That's right.
and you just saw, I mean, the brothers who drove the company, who are on the ground, who people came to see, at the end of it all, had nothing, no licensing, no copy, no protection of their creative art, and the people who own the entity split it up, broke off, started other things. You know, it's just, you know, it's like you see repeatedly that the talent just doesn't get you to where you need to get to, man. It's sobering, you know,
No,
to see it happen
it
all.
is, and it's sad. But I think when a situation like N1 and I guess hip hop music, I guess is related.
Sure.
That it was so early, like you didn't know that there was money to be made off that because those people, you know, everybody was doing it for fun or doing it for
Sure.
the love,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
They did it not because like rappers didn't start rapping because they wanted to make money. They were rapping because it was something they enjoyed doing,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like the N1,
Mhm.
right? So before you know it, they had contracts in your face to sign, and they didn't know what they were signing, you know. And by when they got hip to the game, what was happening, because they saw, I guess, the principals of the company living pretty well,
Mhm.
and they weren't, you know, just like with New Edition said, they would do tours around the whole country and go all everywhere. After the tour, they would drop back off at their project, right? So when that consciousness hits you and say, well, why is that? You know, then that's when you start, you know, it could be a little bit too late because you already signed these papers, you
Right.
know. So again, it's kind of hard to say, don't sign this because you want to be part of something that you love and do what you love. Because what was the alternative? You know? But yeah, there's got to be a way we can somehow, you know, if these creators, new artists, they need to reach out to an attorney. And I think one of the biggest pitfalls is that I see is people don't want to pay for a lawyer, but yet that's the most important thing they need is the protection. So whatever it is that you love, you're gonna have to make that investment in yourself and get legal representation to get the protection. Because I know early on, a lot of artists come to me, and you know they didn't necessarily want to pay me the fees. They would always say, "Well, when I get paid, you get paid," and yada yada yada. And I just told them straight up, I can't invest more in your dream than you, right? So if I'm investing more in your dream,
Right.
it's never going to work. So you
Mm.
got to take the initiative and commitment in your own self to get protection, number one, right? Because you got to protect your art. And I don't see any other way to protect your art unless you hire the right professional team to help you do that, you know?
Wow. Powerful. Duane, talk to listeners and viewers about some of those lean years because what's between the lines here is that you're also an entrepreneur yourself with your own firm, um, working directly with clients, etc. I want you to prepare those who are looking on the industry as being glamorous and glitzy. Um, Tell them the truth about just how difficult it is to navigate in that world. You know, It's not all
it's
peaches
extremely
and cream,
difficult.
right?
It's extremely difficult. If in fact, if you get a bolt of lightning hit you and you come with the superstar client right out the gate, outside of that, you necessarily have to just keep getting out there, creating relationships, building relationships with other lawyers. Hopefully, they could bring you in on some deals. You may have to get side gigs while you maintain your gig, to keep that moving. Because some deals could be very lucrative, other deals not so. And artists got to remember that if you get that advance money, you won't get paid again until that money's recouped, and that could be for years later. So that might be the only check you get. So if you're signing a deal and they give you some like $75,000 as an advance, you may think that's a lot of money to have in your pocket, but that's the only check you're going to get until you recoup that money, and you can start earning some royalties off the music. And a lot of people don't realize that. They look back, they spend the money, that's when's my next check coming? It may not come for a while until you earn that money back. So it is tough. This is not, that's why you gotta have a commitment and a plan and get the right people around you so you can withstand a lot of these pitfalls that's waiting for you out here. Because it's not all easy. There's a lot of celebrities we look at now are doing great things, but look how many years it took them to get there. It's not really a overnight success. They've been working at this for a very, very, very long time. Look at Jay-Z, right? He's very successful, but he couldn't get a record deal early on. I think 10 labels said no. Look how many years Beyonce's been in the industry with her groups. A lot of years until, before they got to this point. It's just a lot of hard work, ingenuity. But you got to remain confident in yourself. You got to believe in what you're doing. You got to stay hopeful. You got to stay prayerful. You have to know that God has a plan for you and God will lead you through. And you have to be cemented in that belief. And if you really want to do this, you're not going to sway too far from your goals.
Duane, I'm going to ask you almost finally to just, and I know it's not possible for us to go back in time, but we gave some sobering examples of creatives who were taken advantage of. If you and I could just maybe go back in time, Twinkie Clark, impactful gospel artist, is approached by the label to sell her publishing for a car. What do you say to Twinkie, man, as her go-to? It's,
don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different stories, right? Because it's not just, I think we have to know what our worth is, right?
Sure,
you have to know your worth. Because if you know what your worth is, you would not get a car for your publishing, right? Another story is, we all know who Berry Gordy is, right? He owned Motown. He had his own record label as well, not Tamla Records. He owned a lot of publishing. Everybody was there. But in the 90s, he sold Motown for $61 million, right? And I think a year and a half later after that, the company sold Motown too, resold it to Polygram, I believe, for $300 million, right? So he might be feeling like Twinkie, I guess, when he heard that, right? So you don't really understand what your worth is, and it's kind of eye-opening that someone of that stature didn't really understand what the value of what he had was, right? Only way I can kind of look at that and maybe think of some type of logic is that maybe that was the first time in his life someone dropped $61 million in his face. And how could you really walk away from that, right? But again, a year and a half so later, they sold it for 300 million. So that's just the stark difference.
Wow. Wow. And for every story like this, there's also a good one. I think it's the young man who acted or did a voiceover for Lion King. Young kid said he was approached with some advance up front. And his mom said to him, no, wait, if they're going to advance that much,
That's right.
you're probably worth much more.
Right.
Hold off. And he
That's
says
right.
he's still collecting checks because they negotiated something different.
That's right.
But those stories are few and far in between, man. Yeah.
Few and far between, but again, if you kind of hold off a bit and don't sign the first thing that comes to you. I know it's tough because you want to get in the game.
Sure.
You might do yourself a lot better. It might be beneficial if you at least get a professional to come and help guide you through that. Because if somebody is trying to buy something off of you, there's value right there on the outset. It has to be.
Sure.
You may not see it, but somebody else wants it. So you got to figure out why would they want it, right? And if you find out why they want it, then that gives you a little bit of ability to now negotiate a fair deal, And also for those people out there who's thinking about publishing and selling it, if you could do admin deals on publishing, which you're not selling your publishing. What that is, somebody is going to admin your deal, your publishing, where they're going to help license it out to other companies for use. But then you get the rights back after 3 years. You don't sell it straight out. You get the rights back after a couple of years, and you keep doing that. Wow. Right? So you don't have to ever really sell your publishing. You can just do an admin deal where you give the rights away for 3 or 4 years, and it comes back to you after that. And you go do another deal somewhere else. And do another deal somewhere else. So that could be an alternative than selling your publishing, especially if you need a check early.
Yeah. And it's a good segue, man. Duane, I'm gonna ask you before we close to share ways people can get in touch with you. As I said before, I was honored to meet you because you know what happens when you are around creatives and you're a lawyer. They think lawyers do everything. And for a long time, I didn't know who to send people to when they had, entertainment law issues or challenges. And once I met Duane and I had people I could send, I had a person I could send people to, and the referrals, when the people came back, they were like, he was thorough, he was patient, he made complicated language simple, or he gave me things to think about I never thought about initially before meeting with him. Please share ways people can get in touch with you.
You can reach out to me. Well, I have a website. You want to check out my website called is www.d-harley-pc.com. I have an email, dharley@d-harley-pc.com. My office phone number is 212-683-8464. Drop me a line, drop me a note. I'm on Instagram as dlegal77. I'm on Instagram. I said Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore. And I'm on
Duane, what I'll do also, man, is I'll put it in the notes too. So
yeah, that'd be great.
You not catch it when you say it. So I'll just, listeners and viewers, I'll put his information in the notes as well with all his handles. So you can, connect with him and get some input, man, on where you want to go. You're creative, you're talented, but you also want to protect your work product. So it's worth connecting with Mr. Harley and getting the help that you need so you protect what you have Finally, Duane, I'm going to ask you to say something to that person who is listening, because it's between the lines, but we could also say that a lot of brothers and sisters don't feel they belong in the industry, giving advice and reviewing contracts, because there's a perception that you only do that when you look a certain way. I think you've encouraged people who look like us to know there's a place in this industry for you. If you come in and you are a person of integrity and you do hard work, there is room for you. Please say something to that person who is listening, who wants to know, do I have a space here? Do I fit in? Do I belong?
Well, listen, absolutely belong, because people who look like us, we are the content creators, right? We are the standard out there for all the social music, anything that's in culture. We're the culture creators. So there will always be a space for us because we created this culture that's making all the money, right? The hip hop is making the most money in all music across the board right now. And we created that, right? Our fashion is bringing a lot of money for all these businesses right now. We created that, right? Anything we do, we look like the part because we created that. And you have to know that we created that therefore you do belong and you're supposed to be here as well. So just be positive, work hard. And, you know, if this is what you desire to be, only thing stopping you is yourself.
Appreciate it, man. Somebody said, it sounds like Duane has read a lot of music publications and wanted to know if industry rule number 3080 is actually a statute.
Yeah.
Did Q-Tip just make that up?
It is, because the industry is shady, you know, and that's the way it is. But being that you know that, and it's not a secret, now you have all the opportunity to safeguard against that shadiness, right? If you know the business and know what you're doing, then that's not going to affect you at all, right? You're there for one thing, is to protect the rights of your clients, and do that to the best of your ability, because there's always going to be an opportunity for someone going to try to trip you up. And you just can't let it happen, because, you know, this is warfare. And you have to have that mentality that you're in this thing and you're not going to be moved, right? You're here to stay, you're here to protect, and you're here to, you know, push the culture forward.
Awesome, man. Duane Harley has his own firm, specializes in all things entertainment. I'll put his information in the notes. Duane, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Joining us again on the Water Word podcast. Appreciate it.
You.
Appreciate it. Appreciate
All
it.
right.